In the ashes of war, not every secret was buried. Some were sealed in vaults, burned from the record, or spirited away under the cover of night. What lingers are whispers of vanished ships, hidden laboratories, and files torn from histories. Grasp. To look too closely is to glimpse a shadow war, a contest fought not for survival but for silence. And silence, history reminds us, is often the most dangerous weapon of all. On 6 May 1945, 3 days before Germany's official surrender, the Royal Navy authorized a final classified operation under the code name Eclipse. While the world's attention centered on the ruins of Berlin, a small convoy of 6 vessels slipped quietly from Kiel, their orders sealed in Admiralty pouches marked Most Secret. The convoy's purpose was to transport captured Nazi personnel, sensitive documents, and experimental technology to British-controlled ports. By dawn on 9th May, the entire convoy had vanished in the Baltic Sea, and within months almost every record connected to Eclipse disappeared from official files. Contemporaneous naval dispatches indicate the convoy consisted of HMS Bulldog Taichi, a destroyer, 2 minesweepers and 3 requisitioned cargo ships. The manifest, never publicly released, allegedly contained seized archives from the German Navy's signals branch, alongside scientific equipment removed from laboratories. In Lübeck and Flensburg, rumors circulated among dock workers that the ships carried disassembled components of radar-evading devices recovered from Peenemünde, though these claims remain unsubstantiated. Among the prisoners aboard were believed to be 4 high-ranking German officers, including Kapitän José Heinrich Düring, formerly attached to the U-boat command staff, and 2 unnamed scientists allegedly tied to Luftwaffe research on jet propulsion. None would ever be accounted for again. The convoy's last confirmed position was logged near Bornholm Island at 23:40 on 8th May. A wireless transmission sent under duress, fragmentary, heavily distorted by interference, contained the words, "Shadow, tracking, under," before breaking off entirely. Attempts to contact the convoy thereafter received no response. By 12th May, Admiralty Command declared the operation a navigational loss, citing heavy minefields still active in the Baltic. Yet internal memos within the Naval Intelligence Division reveal deep disagreement with the official explanation. One file, declassified in 1974 under the 30-year rule, refers cryptically to enemy pursuit units beyond surrendered command, interpreted by some historians as evidence of Soviet submarine activity. Soviet naval forces had already deployed to seize German research facilities along the Baltic coast, and NKVD records confirm that Moscow had standing orders to intercept Allied vessels believed to be removing valuable intelligence. A 1947 MI6 memorandum, heavily redacted, acknowledged the possibility that the convoy had been attacked, but no official blame was ever assigned. What makes Eclipse particularly unusual is the subsequent disappearance of its paper trail. The Admiralty's Operational Index for May 1945 contains no reference to the mission. Routine convoy logs for the Baltic Theatre show a gap where Eclipse should be listed. Even casualty records fail to mention the sailors and officers believed to have been lost. Families of the crew received notices of death attributing the losses to training accidents or severe weather, though meteorological reports for the dates in question show calm seas and light winds. In 1962, a Danish fisherman reported finding wreckage marked with British naval insignia off the southern tip of Bornholm. Local authorities retrieved fragments of steel plating and a warped communication headset, later handed to NATO officials. No public acknowledgement followed. Privately, a Danish defense liaison claimed the material was collected by British representatives within 48 hours and removed from Copenhagen by aircraft. The fragments have never been displayed, catalogued, or confirmed in any naval museum collection. By the 1980s, speculation among researchers turned toward what the convoy was carrying rather than the cause of its disappearance. Notes recovered from the private diary of Lieutenant Simdr Edward Hale, who served in naval intelligence, contain a passing reference to Eclipse cargo RDF cloaking device components priority. RDF, or radio direction finding, was the foundation of Allied radar. If German engineers had indeed developed countermeasures, the Allies would have had enormous incentive to secure them before the Soviets. Adding to the mystery, fragments of OSS communications from April 1945 suggest parallel American efforts to capture similar technology. A cable from London headquarters warns, ensure secured crates reach Portsmouth, prevent Russian acquisition, possible overlap with Brit convoy ops. Though the connection is circumstantial, it reinforces suspicions that Eclipse was targeted by multiple parties. Attempts to recover the truth through freedom of information requests have consistently failed. The British Ministry of Defence maintains that no documents relating to an operation named Eclipse exist. Researchers point out, however, that the codename itself may have been purged from indexes, replaced with innocuous designations to obscure its trail. In 1993, a retired naval archivist anonymously claimed that he personally witnessed orders to shred convoy records in 1946 under instruction from Whitehall. His account, though unverifiable, aligns with the pattern of erasure seen across multiple repositories. Soviet archives, partially opened in the 1990s, provide tantalizing but incomplete hints. The March 1946 NKVD briefing refers to foreign transport intercepted, May Baltic waters, contents secured for transfer Sverdlovsk. The passage is vague and lacks specific identifiers, but some historians view it as a veiled acknowledgement of Eclipse. If accurate, the materials and possibly the prisoners were diverted into the Soviet Union's rapidly expanding weapons research program. As of today, no wreckage officially tied to the Eclipse convoy has been located. The Baltic sea floor remains heavily mined and difficult to survey. Several commercial diving expeditions, conducted in the 2000s, reported sonar contacts consistent with mid-20th century cargo vessels, yet political sensitivities and safety risks halted further exploration. Without direct evidence, the fate of the convoy remains locked between rumor and suppressed record. The families of the lost men never received closure. Most were told that their relatives perished in accidents unrelated to combat. Yet a handful of surviving letters sent home in early May 1945 contradict the official narrative. One sailor wrote to his wife in Portsmouth, "We are on a task no one is to know. They say if it succeeds, the war may end faster, but I have doubts of what we carry." It was his final letter. In the absence of concrete proof, Eclipse has become a shadow chapter of the war, never confirmed, never denied. Whether the convoy struck mines, fell victim to Soviet attack, or was deliberately silenced by its own government to conceal the nature of its cargo remains unresolved. What endures is the silence, a mission erased, a disappearance unacknowledged, and a file that officially never existed. In August 1943, the Royal Air Force launched Operation Hydra, a devastating bombing raid on the German Rocket Development Center at Peenemünde. The attack was believed to have crippled the site, forcing the relocation of V-2 production to underground facilities. Yet by the 1950s, scattered intelligence reports began to suggest that not everything at Peenemünde had been destroyed. Evidence of clandestine airfield activity, decades after its supposed abandonment, emerged, hinting at experiments with aircraft that should not have been possible in the mid-1940s. The first indications surfaced in 1956, when Polish border guards stationed near Świnoujście reported unusual aerial noise over the Baltic at night. Their testimony described sounds resembling jet propulsion, but with a pitch neither piston nor turbine. Local fishermen corroborated these accounts, noting sudden gusts of displaced air across the water, though they never saw the source. At the time, Warsaw Pact Command dismissed the claims as misidentifications of NATO reconnaissance flights. But the reports continued into the early 1960s. In 1961, CIA analysts examining newly acquired KH-4 Corona satellite images noticed what appeared to be resurfaced runways near the ruins of Peenemünde. The official records listed the airfield as inactive since 1945, its facilities stripped bare by Soviet occupation forces. Yet the imagery showed fresh grading of tarmac, faint tire tracks, and rectangular structures not previously mapped. The findings triggered an internal debate within Langley. One declassified memorandum, dated September 1961, reads, "Site activity inconsistent with known East German air patterns, possible experimental testing beyond Warsaw Pact declaration." The Soviets, meanwhile, had their own suspicions. In March 1992, after the collapse of the USSR, fragments of KGB reconnaissance files were made public. One report, compiled in 1963, described unauthorized test flights of unknown configuration tracked over the Baltic near Peenemünde. Radar signatures suggested objects accelerating and maneuvering beyond the performance envelope of MiG, aircraft of the era. The report's conclusion was blunt. Origin unclear, investigation ongoing, possible residual German prototypes in unauthorized hands. These files renewed interest in earlier rumors about Schwarzwind, Black Wind, an alleged Luftwaffe program dedicated to high-speed interceptors and reconnaissance craft. The term appears only once in captured German documents within her fragmentary correspondence between Reichsmarschall Göring's office and the Air Ministry in 1944. Allied intelligence at the time dismissed it as another false lead among dozens of desperate late-war projects. Yet the resurfaced runway evidence suggested that at least part of the program may have been real. A particularly striking testimony came from Karl-Heinz Bauer, a former Luftwaffe technician who, in a 1974 interview, claimed to have witnessed night flights at Peenemünde as late as 1947 after the war's end. According to Bauer, the aircraft were unlike any Messerschmitt or Focke-Wulf design. He described long fuselages with no propellers, glowing at the rear, lifting almost silently before roaring away. His account, though unverifiable, aligned with Soviet notes describing objects of cigar-shaped heat emissions detected. Official history holds that Peenemünde was stripped clean after 1945. Red Army engineers dismantled facilities, and German scientists were deported either to the Soviet Union or through Operation Paperclip to the United States. The site itself became restricted military terrain, later used by the East German Army for missile testing. But records show that an airstrip was maintained well into the Cold War, officially for helicopter training. Why the runway was periodically resurfaced, despite no documented fixed-wing use, has never been explained. The strongest lead came from a curious incident in 1967, when a Swedish air traffic controller at Malmö recorded a radar track of an unidentified aircraft entering Swedish airspace from the direction of Usedom Island. The target accelerated rapidly before vanishing from screens without any corresponding NATO or Warsaw Pact flight plan. Swedish defense intelligence quietly raised the issue, with both NATO command and Soviet representatives. Both sides denied knowledge. The report was quietly shelved, resurfacing only in declassified archives in 2004. Even more troubling are the missing German records. Of the thousands of pages seized from Luftwaffe research divisions in 1945, not a single technical specification for experimental aircraft linked to Peenemünde remains. Historians believe that either the documents were deliberately destroyed or they were selectively removed by Allied intelligence agencies before public archiving. The absence itself is conspicuous. Programs of lesser significance, such as advanced gliders, are well documented, yet any trace of Schwarzwind or similar projects is absent. The question remains, who, if anyone, was operating at Peenemünde after the war? Some suggest rogue Soviet units conducted experiments there, using appropriated German prototypes. Others argue it was a staging ground for early Cold War black projects, hidden under the cover of East German jurisdiction. A minority theory posits that German engineers left behind, or covertly repatriated, continued their work unofficially outside formal Allied oversight. In 1999, a team of German archaeologists gained limited access to restricted portions of the former airfield. Beneath layers of overgrowth and concrete collapse, they uncovered fragments of alloy unfamiliar to standard Luftwaffe production. Laboratory analysis identified traces of titanium, rarely used in German wartime industry, but consistent with post-war aerospace experimentation. Their findings were quietly confiscated by German federal authorities, citing defense sensitivity, despite the material being over 50 years old. Today, Peenemünde stands as a museum and memorial to the victims of forced labor who died, constructing the V-2 rockets. Tourists wander through reconstructed barracks and displays of missile remnants. The runways lie cracked and empty, remnants of Cold War abandonment. Yet in certain sections, patches of newer concrete betray resurfacing that cannot be explained by official history. Locals still recall strange noises in the night sky during the 1950s and 60s. Some whisper that the last flights from Peenemünde were never German, Soviet, or American, but something in between, a ghost of the Reich's unfulfilled ambitions. The story of the ghost airfield is not one of flying saucers or fantasy, but of secrets buried under layers of bureaucracy, denial, and selective memory. Whether experimental aircraft flew from Peenemünde after 1945 may never be proven. What remains is the unsettling convergence of witness testimony, satellite images, and erased files, all pointing to a truth that official history insists cannot exist. On 20th May 1945, just weeks after Germany's surrender, American officers from the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA, prepared the first transports of German scientists bound for the United States. The program would later become infamous under the code name Operation Paperclip. Official history describes the project as the relocation of some 1,600 German scientists and engineers, many with backgrounds in rocketry and aviation. But buried beneath redactions and missing files lies evidence of a second, unacknowledged stream of transfers, an operation historians now refer to as Paperclip Black. Hints of this shadow program first surfaced in the mid-1970s when a cache of shredded cables was discovered in a locked storeroom at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. The documents, partially reconstructed by archivists, referenced names absent from known Paperclip rosters. Several were individuals previously barred from entry due to direct ties to concentration camp experiments. Yet the cables included directives for falsified employment histories, suggesting deliberate cover-up of their pasts. The shredded files also contained receipts for temporary identity documents produced by the Counterintelligence Corps. Even in the official record, inconsistencies abound. For example, Dr. Walter Schreiber, a physician implicated in wartime human experimentation, was declared ineligible for recruitment. Yet later, Army documents show he briefly worked at Randolph Air Force Base under a pseudonym before being quietly transferred to South America. His case is often cited as the first glimpse into Paperclip's black dimension, an unofficial mechanism to extract expertise while erasing the scientist's identity. In 1987, journalist Linda Hunt obtained access to JIOA records under the Freedom of Information Act. Among the releases was a partially legible memorandum dated 1946, noting the existence of Category C personnel requiring special handling. The memo distinguished between ordinary Paperclip recruits and those whose backgrounds, if revealed, would provoke international scandal. The individuals were to be relocated without acknowledgement in manifest lists and integrated into civilian industries before reassignment to military projects. One of the most troubling indications comes from U.S. Army Medical Corps reports. In the early 1950s, several patents in chemical warfare technology, filed under the names of American inventors, bear unmistakable technical similarities to experiments described in confiscated German research. Yet the supposed inventors had no prior expertise in the field. Forensic review of the patent drafts suggests translation from German originals, their authorship replaced to obscure origin. In some cases, the very diagrams match photographs captured at Dachau and Ravensbrück. A rare glimpse inside the cover-up emerged in 1994 when the U.S. General Accounting Office conducted a limited review of Paperclip documents. Though most files remained classified, the GAO acknowledged numerous gaps and anomalies in the rosters, noting entire sections of transfer records were missing. Of 104 scientists flagged by Allied war crimes investigators, 39 appear to have vanished from European archives in 1946. None are recorded as tried, imprisoned, or executed. Their trail ends precisely where the paperclip records grow silent. Survivor testimony from former forced laborers further complicates the picture. In 1969, a Polish prisoner named Andrzej Kowalski claimed he was interrogated in Frankfurt by American officers about experiments he witnessed at Mittelbau Dora. His testimony implicated a physicist known only as Dr. K. Official records identify no such figure among paperclip recruits, but a 1945 OSS cable, later revealed in declassified intercepts, mentions a priority exfiltration of Dr. K assigned provisional U.S. identity. The details match Kowalski's account almost exactly. The Soviet Union was acutely aware of these irregularities. KGB files released in the 1990s describe intercepted American communications referring to ghost transfers of German specialists. Moscow believed the United States had deliberately concealed the scale of recruitment, especially in biological and chemical warfare. One Soviet assessment, dated October 1947, warns, Americans shield criminal specialists under fabricated documents. Watch closely for appearances in civilian institutions. The file concludes that U.S. operations were far larger in scope than declared. What became of these hidden scientists is uncertain. Some may have been integrated into defense laboratories. Under assumed names, their origins erased from personnel files. Others, like Schreiber, were later moved abroad when scrutiny risked exposure. In at least 2 cases, death certificates of German nationals appear to have been falsified in 1946, while men of identical physical description surface in American census records under new identities. The moral implications were quietly ignored at the time. The emerging Cold War drove both the US and the USSR to prioritize technological advantage over justice. By 1947, the Nuremberg tribunals were concluding and public appetite for accountability waned. Behind closed doors, the US quietly expanded. Its weapons research with German expertise, officially sanitized, unofficially compromised. The most haunting element remains the missing documents. Of the estimated 100,000 pages of captured German scientific files, thousands are unaccounted for. Requests from historians and investigators often return the same response: records destroyed under routine disposition schedules. Yet several archivists have privately acknowledged that destruction orders came unusually early, some within months of capture. One former National Archives employee claimed that entire folders marked restricted transfer were pulled in 1952 and never seen again. By the late 20th century, only fragments of paperclip black could be pieced together. Shredded cables, anomalous patterns, survivor testimony, Soviet intercepts, together they paint a disturbing portrait of a recruitment program that not only sought technological superiority, but actively erased the crimes of those it protected. In doing so, it blurred the line between victor and vanquished, justice and complicity. For the families of victims in the camps, the erasure cuts deepest. The knowledge that men responsible for atrocities may have lived out comfortable lives in American suburbs, their histories buried under false names, represents a wound that never healed. And for historians, the silence of the missing files remains a void where truth should be. Paperclip officially brought America its rocket pioneers. Unofficially, it may have carried ghosts that history was never meant to acknowledge. In the spring of 1945, as the Third Reich crumbled, Red Army units moved swiftly into Lower Silesia. Their orders were not only to seize territory, but to secure rumored German superweapons and research facilities. At the center of their hunt lay Project Riese, a vast network of underground complexes carved into the Aul Mountains near the town of Waldenburg, today Wałbrzych, Poland. Officially, these subterranean works were incomplete military headquarters for Hitler and his High Command. Yet Soviet archival fragments hint at something more. Chambers deliberately collapsed, machinery destroyed, and crates removed under strict NKVD supervision. The first Allied accounts of Riese come from the reports of the Polish Home Army in 1944. Resistance fighters described forced laborers, primarily prisoners from Gross-Rosen concentration camp, digging massive tunnels reinforced with concrete. The workers whispered of machines that burned the skin and barrels marked with chemical hazard symbols. When the Red Army advanced into the region in May 1945, they found corpses in abandoned galleries, evidence of explosives used to seal, deeper shafts and scattered remains of electrical equipment. Soviet engineers immediately declared the site a matter of state security. A 1946 NKVD report, later leaked during the Glasnost years, describes transport of secured crates from Owl Mountain shafts redirected to Facility 21, Sverdlovsk Oblast. The crates' contents are never specified. However, a follow-up memo warns of residual hazards, chemical and radiological. Western historians seized on this phrase as possible evidence that nuclear-related research had been conducted at Riese, though no physical proof has ever surfaced. Eyewitness accounts from local miners add unsettling detail. In interviews conducted in the 1950s, several recalled being conscripted by Soviet officers to clear rubble near the Osovka complex. They described finding chambers filled with twisted metal, unlike any conventional mining equipment. One man claimed that when he touched a fragment, his hands blistered within hours. Another reported that Soviet soldiers carried Geiger counters, a technology few locals had ever seen before. Within weeks, the area was sealed and declared off-limits to civilians. Western intelligence took notice as well. In 1947, British SIS intercepted a Soviet cable referencing assets transferred from Giant Complex, the Allied code name for Riese. The cable listed priority technology alongside special personnel. Analysts debated whether this referred to surviving German scientists, yet when Operation Paperclip files were cross-checked, several expected individuals were conspicuously absent from both American and Soviet rosters. Their ultimate fate remains unknown. Physical exploration of the tunnels has done little to resolve the mystery. In 1953, Polish authorities attempted to survey the Wodarz complex, but abandoned the effort after workers fell ill from unknown causes. Officially, the illness was attributed to poor ventilation. Unofficially, miners spoke of poison in the air that lingered only in certain chambers. Radiation testing decades later revealed elevated levels in isolated pockets, though not enough to confirm the presence of nuclear material. Declassified Soviet engineering maps provide further intrigue. One schematic, drawn in 1946, shows a series of galleries branching from Riese into deeper, uncharted rock. These extensions do not appear in German construction records. Some historians argue they were post-war additions, while others believe they represent hidden sections deliberately destroyed by retreating SS units. The schematic carries the notation, "Sealed. Do not reopen without clearance from Moscow." During the Cold War, Riese faded into obscurity. Soviet-aligned Polish authorities discouraged research, branding the tunnels as abandoned Nazi folly. Yet Western intelligence occasionally revisited the question. A CIA assessment from 1961 speculated that the Soviets had removed experimental, heavy water apparatus from the site, possibly connected to Germany's stalled nuclear ambitions. The report noted similarities between equipment described at Riese and devices later observed in Soviet uranium enrichment facilities. In the WWII 1970s, amateur explorers gained limited access to parts of the complexes. They found rusted rails, collapsed shafts, and graffiti left by forced laborers. Among the debris were fragments of documents bearing Reichsadler insignia, though none provided technical data. What drew most attention, however, were anomalies. In the rock itself, boreholes lined with vitrified surfaces, as though exposed to extreme heat. No conventional mining process of the era could account for such conditions. One particularly troubling lead comes from testimony gathered in 1990, after the fall of communism. A former Soviet engineer, speaking anonymously, claimed he oversaw shipments from Riese in 1945. According to his account, crates marked with double lightning bolt insignia were transported under heavy guard to rail depots bound for the east. He recalled strict orders never to open them, but noted they required forklifts to move, suggesting immense weight. When pressed, he admitted rumors among the soldiers that the crates contained machines from another age. Despite decades of speculation, no definitive answers have emerged. Excavations continue to this day, often funded by private groups, seeking lost Nazi gold or hidden archives. While treasure hunters search for myths, serious researchers remain haunted by the question of what the Soviets truly found. Radiation traces, collapsed chambers, and missing scientists all point towards something more than an unfinished bunker system. Today, visitors can tour parts of Riese, walking through damp corridors where concrete meets bare stone. Guides recount tales of Hitler's supposed headquarters, of slave labor, of incomplete projects. Yet beneath the tourist narrative lingers a deeper unease. Why did the Soviets classify their findings for decades? Why were crates moved in secrecy, with records scrubbed? And why does the Earth itself still bear scars of heat and poison that official history refuses to explain? Project Riese remains a riddle at the intersection of war, secrecy, and the Cold War's hunger for technological supremacy. Whether the Soviets uncovered fragments of an abandoned nuclear program, advanced weapon prototypes, or simply myths, wrapped in concrete, the truth lies buried in sealed shafts and vanished crates. What endures is the silence of archives, the contradictions of testimony, and the haunting possibility that one of the war's deepest secrets was carried east, never to return. By February 1945, the East Prussian city of Königsberg lay under relentless Soviet assault. Streets burned, civilians starved, and the German garrison braced for annihilation. Official histories record only the Red Army's brutal siege and final capture in April. Yet fragments of declassified OSS memoranda, coupled with captured Soviet reports, suggest that weeks before the city's fall, a small group of American operatives slipped into Königsberg under orders never acknowledged by Washington. Their target was not military victory, but the vaults beneath the Reichsbank branch, where intelligence dossiers and foreign currency reserves were rumored to be stored. The operation's origins are murky. A single OSS cable dated 2 February 1945 references priority recovery of records from E-Sector Königsberg, pre-Soviet entry. The message was routed through the Bern station, known for monitoring Axis financial networks. British SIS liaisons were not informed. Within days, a 6-man team reportedly moved through Poland under forged papers, supported by elements of the 2nd Polish Armored Brigade. Their presence never appears in Allied order of battle documents, a silence historians interpret as deliberate. Local testimony from Königsberg survivors offers rare clues. In 1961, a German civilian named Lieselotte Kruger told East German authorities that she witnessed English-speaking soldiers in German uniforms near the Altstadt district during the chaos of February. She recalled hearing gunfire in the direction of the Reichsbank branch late at night, followed by explosions. Her statement, preserved in Stasi files, was dismissed as confused memory until Soviet archives opened briefly in the 1990s, among Noé. The declassified KGB documents was a 1945 frontline report noting a skirmish between enemy agents and retreating Wehrmacht security elements near bank vaults, Königsberg, 16th of February. The agents, it claimed, escaped westward, carrying several containers of unspecified documents. The Soviet officer who filed the report expressed frustration, warning Moscow that valuable industrial and political records have been removed by American saboteurs. No follow-up reports have been located. The alleged raid raises two disturbing questions. What was in those vaults, and why would the United States risk violating agreements with its Soviet ally? Fragmentary OSS planning notes hint at files implicating neutral corporations that maintained secret financial ties with the Reich, some based in Switzerland, others in South America, and even a handful in the United States. Public exposure of such connections in 1945 would have undermined Allied unity and embarrassed powerful interests. By extracting the evidence before Soviet capture, Washington could control the narrative and protect certain post-war relationships. Equally intriguing are the financial rumors. Post-war Bundesbank audits revealed a shortfall in Reichsbank assets expected to be recovered from Königsberg. Gold reserves and foreign currency deposits listed in Berlin ledgers never appeared in Soviet inventories. A 1948 CIA economic intelligence briefing, still heavily redacted, admits that Reichsbank Königsberg holdings remain unaccounted for, possible pre-capture removal by third party. Though never explicitly linked to OSS activities, the coincidence is difficult to ignore. The fate of the operatives themselves remains shadowed in disinformation. U.S. Army casualty reports for February 1945 list several men as killed in training accidents in England, yet later personnel rosters show the same names attached to OSS units in Europe. Cross-referencing dates reveals striking overlaps. Historians suspect these false deaths were used to erase identities of those involved in Königsberg. Families of the men received folded flags and official condolences, never knowing their relatives had been reassigned under new identities. Soviet bitterness over the incident lingered well into the Cold War. A 1952 GRU analysis of American intelligence capabilities included a special section on Königsberg theft. It accused the US of removing not only financial records, but also scientific data on advanced metallurgy and fuel research from East Prussian institutes. The Soviets claimed this data later surfaced in American patents, though the documentation was circumstantial. Still, the accusation reinforced Moscow's belief that its Western allies had betrayed post-war trust before the war even ended. Modern researchers face a wall of silence. Freedom of information requests regarding OSS operations in Königsberg return the standard reply, no responsive records. Yet in 2009, a private archive sale in London included a personal diary from a US intelligence officer stationed in Poland in 1945. One entry described men moving through East Prussia under impossible orders, retrieve files before Ivan arrives. The diary, authenticated by handwriting experts, stops abruptly in mid-February, suggesting either censorship or deliberate removal of later pages. Today, the vaults of the old Reichsbank building lie beneath modern Kaliningrad, inaccessible without Russian permission. Excavations in the 1990s uncovered collapsed tunnels leading to sealed chambers, but officials declared them structurally unsafe. No systematic survey has ever been allowed. Rumors persist among locals of hidden rooms bricked over during Soviet reconstruction, though no proof has surfaced. The disavowed raid on Königsberg thus occupies a strange limbo, never admitted, never disproven. Its traces lie scattered across erased casualty lists, missing Reichsbank assets, and Soviet accusations buried in forgotten files. What is certain is that something vanished from Königsberg in those final months of the war. Whether gold, incriminating, corporate records, or technology too dangerous to share. What remains is silence, as if the city itself swallowed the evidence under its ruins, leaving only whispers in classified margins and the families of men declared dead who may never have been. When the guns fell quiet, the hunt for truth only began. Behind the monuments and speeches, a darker archive survives, one written in erased names, missing documents, and unanswered questions. Each revelation opens a door that was meant to stay closed, each silence a scar carved into the world we inherited. Some stories were buried to protect nations, others to conceal sins. Yet the shadows remain, waiting for those willing to step into forbidden light.